They say you can tell everything about a relationship by who pulls out the chair and who walks ahead without looking back. My name is Caleb Mercer. I'm 45 years old and own a small hands-on woodshop called Mercer Craft and Timberworks in Flagstaff, Arizona. It's not flashy, but it's mine. I build with my hands, create from scratch, and send off each piece with the kind of pride that doesn't need applause. My wife, Vivian Mercer, is the opposite kind of builder. She leads one of the top creative teams at Sylvain Atelier, a luxury interior design firm known for transforming penthouses and gallery spaces into magazine spreads. Vivian is the kind of woman who walks into a room and makes people straighten their spines. She used to come home, lift my calloused hands in hers and say, "You shaped the world, Caleb." That was a long time ago. These days, she rarely touches me, unless it's to adjust my tie before a formal event. When Vivian mentioned Sylvain's annual Visionaries of Design Gala, I barely looked up from the plans on my workbench. I thought it would be like all the other events. I'd rent a tux, stand quietly near the caviar, and let her orbit her world of art world elites, while I smile politely and drink something overpriced. That's been my role for years, the invisible half. But something in her voice was different this time. Sharper, nervous, like she needed everything to go perfectly. Still, I got ready the way I always do. Pressed the shirt, polished the shoes. She came out of the bedroom in a deep silver gown that made the air around her feel colder. I told her she looked stunning. She said thank you, but didn't say I looked good in return. The drive was quiet. She didn't ask about my work, didn't mention the new client I was excited to sign. Her mind was already at the gala, at the compliments, the networking, the competition. I knew my role: hold her purse if needed, nod at strangers, and don't say anything that might embarrass her. That's what support looks like in her world. The Sylvain Gala was held at the Auden Hall downtown, a place where even the air felt expensive. Marble floors, crystal centerpieces, guests floating through in couture like they belonged in another century. I felt out of place the moment I stepped onto the carpet. But I followed her in anyway. That's what I've always done. What I didn't know was that tonight I wasn't just going to feel invisible. I was going to be branded. The moment we stepped into Auden Hall, it felt like I had been transported into a world where nothing I'd built with my hands mattered. The air smelled like lavender and designer perfume. Waiters in velvet vests carried champagne on silver trays. Couples clinked crystal glasses while standing beneath abstract light fixtures that looked more like NASA installations than chandeliers. Vivian straightened her back the moment we entered, head high, shoulders square, like she was stepping into her rightful kingdom. I followed, slightly behind, exactly where she wanted me. We approached our table. Table 14. One of the close to the stage but not quite seats, the kind reserved for high performers just below the executive tier. The place cards were printed on thick ivory stock, each name in elegant gold calligraphy. I saw hers first. Vivian Mercer, Creative Director, Sylvain Atelier. Then mine. Except it didn't say Caleb Mercer. It said Wood Boy. At first, I thought it was a misprint, some clumsy intern's mistake. But then I heard it, the low chuckle from across the table. A designer with artfully gelled hair raised an eyebrow at me, clearly in on the joke. A woman seated beside Vivian whispered behind her wineglass, barely able to hide her smirk. I stared at the card. My chest tightened. My hands curled slightly, not into fists, but into the shape of work, the same way I gripped sandpaper or held a chisel when smoothing edge grain. Vivian didn't flinch. She didn't gasp or laugh. She just leaned in and whispered,
Don't overreact. It's Blair's sense of humor. You know how she is. Always ironic. Blair, the creative vice president, the power broker of Solvane, the woman Vivian admired, no, idolized, the one who'd invited us tonight, personally. My eyes didn't leave the card. I wanted to laugh, or maybe I wanted to scream. Instead, I pulled out the chair and sat down slowly, the card still in my hand. My jaw locked. My throat itched like I'd swallowed sawdust. "Inside joke," she said again, this time louder, as if repeating it would make it palatable. I looked around the table. Most of them were already sipping, whispering, snickering. No one said hello. No one asked about me, my shop, the dozens of hours I'd spent furnishing half their common areas. I'd built their display walls, their product shelves, their conference tables. But tonight, I was Wood Boy, a nickname masquerading as a joke, a punchline plated in gold. My first instinct was to walk out, but then I thought of Vivian. I'd been at her side through every failed pitch, every 2 a.m. meltdown, every Sunday spent reworking PowerPoint slides while she cried over design approvals. I helped her launch her freelance career back when we were splitting a studio apartment and eating canned soup. I built her first office desk with reclaimed cherry wood because we couldn't afford new lumber. And now, here I was, reduced to a gag for her boss's amusement. I took a slow breath. In, out. Then I picked up the champagne flute the waiter had just refilled and took a long, deliberate sip. I set it down without breaking eye contact with Vivian. She blinked once, maybe sensing the shift in me. "Caleb, please," she whispered, not even finishing the sentence. "Please what? Don't cause a scene? Don't make tonight about me?" I smiled, a small, hollow smile. The kind of smile that men wear when they've just remembered how much they've given and how little they've gotten in return. Dinner began. The courses arrived like choreographed ballet. Beet tartare, microgreens, saffron risotto. I chewed and swallowed, but I tasted nothing. My focus remained on the card. Blair finally arrived halfway through the entree. She swept toward our table like royalty, dressed in a sleek black jumpsuit with shoulder pads that could cut glass. She didn't introduce herself to me, didn't even glance at me. Instead, she walked straight to Vivian, air-kissed both cheeks, and purred, "Love what you did with the Olsen project. You've got the edge, Viv." I didn't move. I didn't smile. But I felt Vivian sit a little taller. Blair finally looked at me. Her eyes twinkled. "Oh, and you must be Wood Boy," she said with a wink and a laugh that drew attention from 2 neighboring tables. "You do wood, right? Cabinets, that sort of thing?" I nodded, slowly. "Yes. The same wood that is currently holding up your executive kitchen shelves and the bespoke bar you toasted at last quarter." Blair blinked, then grinned wider. "Ah, clever and handy. What a find." The table cluckled. Vivian didn't laugh, but she didn't stop them either. I leaned back in my chair, the linen napkin still in my lap, my dignity balancing on the edge of a fork. Let them laugh. Let them joke. Because what they didn't know, what Vivian had forgotten, is that the man they just branded a joke builds everything he touches to last.
I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm out, flip a plate, or cause a scene worthy of viral fame. That's not my language. Mine is made of sawdust and discipline, precision and pause. So, I sat through dinner, holding that ridiculous name card in my pocket like a splinter under my skin. I smiled when appropriate. I lifted my glass when Vivian's team toasted a marketing campaign I'd never heard of. But inside, I wasn't swallowing shame anymore. I was sharpening something much stronger. As the dessert course was being served, some delicate arrangement of lavender mousse and gold foil, I stood up without a word. Vivian glanced up, startled. "Caleb?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I walked, calmly and deliberately, across the ballroom floor toward the bar. The music swelled behind me, some jazzy number, maybe Sinatra. The chandeliers glittered above, but none of it touched me. Not anymore. At the bar, I ordered a bourbon. Neat. The bartender gave me a curious glance, probably expecting slurred bitterness or an outburst. Instead, I thanked him, took a sip, and pulled out my phone. In exactly 12 seconds, I drafted and sent a message to Solvane's procurement department. Subject: Contract termination, effective immediately. Dear procurement team, Holloway Craft and Timber Works is terminating all existing design and fabrication agreements with Solvane Atelier, effective immediately. Please consider all current and pending projects void. Future communication may be directed through legal counsel. Caleb Mercer. I hit send. My thumb didn't even tremble. When I turned around, I noticed Blair watching me from across the room. Her glass paused mid-air. Vivian was whispering to someone, her eyes darting in my direction like a woman trying to contain a fire without water. I walked back to the table, slowly, not with anger, but with gravity. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a simple, well-worn business card. Not gilded, no QR code, just the name of my workshop in understated print. I leaned down and placed it next to Blair's wine glass. You'll need someone else to fix the voice-activated lighting in your corner office. And those walnut panels you like so much, I hope they don't crack when someone else tries to replace them. They're hand-sealed, custom fit, like respect. Difficult to restore once broken. She blinked. Just once. Her smirk faltered. Around the table, the air shifted. No one laughed. No one whispered. Not anymore. Vivian reached for my arm. "Caleb, please, can we talk? Just..." But I was already stepping away. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. Because I realized something in that moment. I had spent years being proud of how quietly I stood behind her, thinking my silence was strength, that my role was to make her shine, even if I stood in shadow. But real strength isn't just standing quietly. It's knowing when to step forward and when to walk away. As I exited the ballroom, I could still hear the clink of cutlery, the hushed murmurs, the champagne laughter. But none of it belonged to me anymore. I stepped out into the night, the air crisp and cleansing. The valet brought my truck, unimpressive among the black sedans and imported sports cars, but reliable, worn in, and undeniably mine. I drove home in silence. Not because I was angry, but because for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The next morning, I was up before the sun. The shop smelled like fresh cedar and glue. I ran my hand across the latest project on my workbench, a commissioned bookshelf for a local library made from reclaimed elm. My hands, rough and steady, moved with purpose. And my heart,
once so tired, beat with something close to clarity. By noon, the phone rang. It was a competing design firm, one of Sylvane's biggest rivals. "We heard what happened at the Gala, and frankly, we've admired your work from afar for years. Would you be open to talking collaboration?" I looked at the email inbox. 5 new inquiries, all from firms I once thought were out of my league. Turns out, self-respect speaks louder than marketing. At lunch, I opened my sketchbook and began to draw. Not for a client, not for a pitch, but for myself. For the first time in years, my designs weren't about fitting into someone else's vision. They were mine. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just needed to stand.
By Monday morning, the ripples had turned into waves. I didn't post anything. I didn't even tell anyone outside my shop, but someone at the Gala, someone who clearly had more decency than the people at table 14, had recorded the moment I slid my business card to Blair and walked out, without raising my voice. It hit the local design circles first, then industry forums, then LinkedIn. In the video, you can't hear what I say, but you can feel it. You can feel the tension, the shift, the moment when someone expected to be humiliated chose to stand with dignity instead. By Wednesday, I had 12 new emails from firms I'd never worked with, 4 of them national, 2 international. They didn't just want my woodwork, they wanted to be associated with my name, with my response, with how I handled something they'd all seen, and too often stayed silent about. "We've worked with people like Blair. You reminded us we don't have to. We saw the video. Respect. Your craftsmanship is exceptional, but your character, that's rare." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't ready to capitalize on a moment that still stung beneath the surface, but when I finally did reply, it was with intention. Yes, I'd love to collaborate. Yes, I'd love to partner with people who respected me, my work, and what I stood for. Then, 3 days after the Gala, a short press release dropped from Solvane Atelier's internal account. Effective immediately, Blair Kincaid has resigned from her position as Creative Vice President of Solvane Atelier following a review of conduct that did not align with company values. I read it once, then again. It was sanitized, impersonal. Exactly the kind of statement a firm will release when they want the problem to disappear without admitting fault. But it was enough. Enough to signal that her empire of smirks and designer cruelty had crumbled. Enough to let me know I wasn't crazy for walking away. Later that night, Vivian came home early. I was at the kitchen counter, sanding the edge of a reclaimed maple slab for a coffee shop redesign. The sawdust clung to my sleeves, grounding me in something real, something mine. She didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway in silence. She wasn't in one of her tailored suits, just jeans and a sweater. Something simple, something familiar. Her makeup was light, her face drawn. I didn't look up until she finally said my name. Caleb. Her voice cracked in the middle. I looked up. She didn't look like the woman who floated through the Gala. She looked like the version of her from years ago. The woman who used to bring me lemon tea while I worked and sit barefoot on my workbench just to talk about nothing. "I didn't think it would get this big," she whispered. "It was just a stupid joke. I didn't think it would cost us everything." "That's the problem," I said, setting down the sandpaper. "You thought it was a game. You thought I was part of that joke." "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "But you laughed." Her lip trembled. "I didn't know what to do. I froze. And when you stood up, I didn't stop you because I was afraid of making it worse." I nodded slowly.
Not because I agreed, but because I understood. I didn't need you to fight the whole room, Viv. I just needed you to not let them make me the punchline. I needed you to remember I was sitting beside you, not behind you. She blinked, and the tears fell. I've been put on probation, she said. HR launched a formal review. I'm off projects. They're talking about suspension, about reputation risk, about whether I'm worth keeping. I looked at her. Really looked. Not the title, not the brand, not the woman who laughed nervously in a room of sharks. I saw someone unraveling. Someone who'd climbed so high she forgot what the ground looked like. And yet, I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt space between who we were and what we'd become. I don't want to lose you, she said quietly. I know, but you already lost me that night. She covered her mouth, a sob slipping through. But I wasn't cruel. I didn't walk away or slam a door. I just stood there, hands resting on the edge of the maple slab, and said the only thing I truly believed. You can't play both sides of respect. You either stand with it or you stand with those who destroy it. She stayed in the workshop long after I returned to the kitchen. I heard her cry quietly in the background, and I let her. Because grief teaches, and sometimes recognition doesn't come from shouting. It comes from the silence left when someone strong finally stops accepting less.
After that night in the workshop, something shifted between us. Not with drama or yelling, but with distance. The kind that grows slowly, like ivy, until you realize you're living behind a wall of silence. Vivian stayed home for the next few days. She didn't return to Solvane. Word had gotten around in the industry. The woman who once commanded meetings with a single raised eyebrow now struggled to make eye contact even with the delivery guy. The pedestal she'd climbed had cracked beneath her feet, and she was still learning how to stand on solid ground again. But we did talk, really talk, for the first time in years. She came into the shop one afternoon as I was finishing a set of floating shelves for a client in Seattle. She stood quietly, just watching me work. The rhythmic sound of sanding, the scent of linseed oil in the air. It was the world I built to stay sane while ours was slowly crumbling. I miss this, she finally said. Not the furniture. You. Being near you when you're calm, focused, real. I didn't look up. I just nodded. I never really saw it. She sat on the old stool in the corner, the one with paint stains and one short leg. That's not true. It is, I said gently. You loved what I represented. Groundedness, simplicity, something to contrast the world you were chasing. But you didn't really want to walk in mine. You wanted me to stay out of the way while you climbed higher. She didn't deny it. Maybe because the truth doesn't need argument. But I never meant to hurt you. I know. But intention doesn't erase impact. And laughing with people who belittled me, that was the moment you left, even if you didn't walk out the door. Silence. Then, I've been offered a position, freelance consulting, smaller firm, less glamour, more freedom. Will you take it? She shrugged. Depends. If I do, it'll be because I want to build something again, not just win. That sat with me. Later that week, I was invited to speak at a local trade design event, not because of my furniture, but because of the story, the video, the quiet way I reclaimed my voice in a room built to keep people like me invisible. I stood on a simple stage in front of architects, artists, builders, and dreamers. I told them about Auden Hall, about the place card, about dignity. Not revenge, not rage, just the importance of knowing your value and walking away when people try to reduce it. After the talk, two young designers approached me. One of them, eyes wide and nervous, said, "Thank you for showing us what strength actually looks like." I thought I had to yell to be heard. I smiled. Sometimes silence echoes louder than noise. Back at the shop that evening, I found Vivian there again, this time holding a bag of takeout from the Vietnamese place we used to love. She didn't ask to come in. She just set the food down on the workbench and said, "No expectations. Just thought you might be hungry." We sat on crates and ate in silence, the shop lights buzzing softly overhead. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was human. We talked again that night about who we used to be, what we let happen, and whether anything was worth salvaging. There were no promises, no big emotional declarations, just honesty and space. The following week, I sent off the completed shelves. A new commission came in. A boutique hotel in Denver wanted handcrafted window frames for their reading lounge. It was the kind of work that didn't get applause at black tie galas, but it would last. And people would sit in those rooms, feel peace in the quiet grain of the wood, and never know my name. And that was okay, because my worth never depended on applause. Vivian didn't move out, but we started living like two people reintroducing themselves after years apart. Sometimes she brought me coffee in the mornings again. Sometimes I asked her what she was reading. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And from honesty, something better might grow.
It's strange how a single word on a name card can expose years of imbalance. Wood boy. Just 2 words, gold-inked and meant as a joke. But what they really did was shine a spotlight on everything I had silently swallowed for too long. The jokes, the dismissals, the polite applause for everyone but me. And yet I didn't burn the table down. I walked away from it. Not because I was weak, but because I finally understood my strength didn't need validation. It needed space to breathe. In the days that followed, I didn't just rebuild my dignity. I reintroduced myself to the world on my terms. I turned humiliation into quiet confidence, mockery into opportunity, and silence into respect. I didn't scream, I didn't curse, I stood. And in that stillness, people saw me, maybe for the first time. Vivian's world cracked too, not out of vengeance, but from truth, catching up. She lost what she thought mattered, and in the quiet, she remembered who I was, who we were. And while we may never go back to the version of us that existed before Auden Hall, we're learning how to speak again. Honestly, slowly, maybe even better. But this isn't just about a marriage or a job or a gala. It's about all the people who've ever been made to feel small for standing in a room they earned their way into. People who build with their hands, lead with their hearts, and get dismissed because they don't dress the part or speak the language of high society. To them, I say this: don't let anyone rename you. You are not Wood Boy. You are not a prop. You are the foundation. And foundations don't need applause to be strong. They just need to stand. Has someone ever tried to reduce you to a joke, only to watch you rise? Share your story in the comments. I read them all. And if you believe dignity speaks louder than drama, subscribe. This is a channel for people who've had enough of being silenced. You're not alone anymore.